Hello everyone, back into today's first video. We're doing the second and final season model roundup for spring 2020 for today's first video. So you can get something like 13 long range models together, see what they're all showing for the spring of 2020. This will be the last time that we do this because tomorrow, Sunday, Galsworthy's spring 2020 forecast will be released. So we are just 24 hours away from the spring forecast being released. This is the last thing we can do before we release the forecast. We're going to go through all of the long-range models from most of the world's leading forecast centres, and we are going to see what they are all showing for this coming season. So, big update to start us off this morning at Galsworthy's, and coming later on today, we're going to have a weekend forecast as always on a Saturday, have your weekend look ahead, and of course, we will also have a week to 10-day video update this afternoon with all of the regular features. Right then, so let's get on with the second and final spring 2020 season model roundup. We're going to start off with the JMA. So we're going to begin with the JMA 500 millibar height anomaly for March, April and May for spring 2020. If you'd like to see all of the detail that you can get with this, you can look at it month by month, and we did that on Thursday. So have a look at the video that we did on Thursday, breaking this down month by month to see what the JMA is forecasting on a monthly basis. However, for the 3 monthly 500 millibar height anomaly, it does look very anticyclonic actually. That's where we are on this chart. So in the top right hand corner of the chart as you're looking at it, that's where we tend to be on most of the long range models. So we have below average heights out to the northwest. We're sending the jet stream northwards. We come over here, can't see Scandinavia, but the jet stream's going off up there somewhere. And so overall that looks like a very anticyclonic high pressure dominated spring, and that is indeed what models forecast on a month-by-month basis as well. Quite a lot of high pressure involved. It means that temperature anomalies for spring 2020 are coming out above average. If the JMA is correct, we're going to have a slightly milder than average spring. Not a big deviation, but certainly above average temperatures expected. And after such a phenomenally wet winter, it's also going for a slightly drier than average spring as well, as you would expect, of course, under a big ridge of high pressure. So on base value, the JMA seems to be going for a mild and dry spring this season, quite interestingly. Right, we'll go over to Brazil. We'll go from Japan to Brazil. This is the 500 millibar height anomaly from the long-range Brazilian model for the spring of 2020. This, as I always say every month, does things a bit differently, in that most 500 millibar height anomalies, it will be the case that blue is extrapolating to low pressure and yellow, orange and red extrapolate to high pressure. This one does things differently, so blue is actually high pressure and yellow, orange and red low pressure. So actually go for quite an unsettled looking pattern for this spring, with a deep trough of below average height centred in the middle of the Atlantic. Not much sign of high pressure. The Azores high looks like it's displaced further south of its usual position, down towards, it's south of the Azores, down towards like the coast of Africa really. And so this will bring in quite an unsettled westerly flow from off the Atlantic. So the Brazilian model is still seeing very, very unsettled conditions continuing through the spring, I'm afraid. Not terribly good news if you're hoping something drier after this very wet winter. Temperature anomalies from a Brazilian model for spring 2020 are forecast to be slightly above average. It is going for milder than average temperatures. Precipitation-wise, this really gives the game away because it does look wetter than average just to the south of us. I mean, it's not a big anomaly for the UK itself, but overall, it looks like we're bringing in wetter than average conditions from off the Atlantic through this spring across many western and northwestern parts of Europe. So a mild but wet spring is being forecast by the Brazilian model. Moving north from Brazil to Canada, this is how CAN6 is looking in terms of its mean sea level pressure anomaly for the spring of 2020. And it's going for a lot of low pressure to the north. Actually, all these blue colours up here, that's deep low pressure continuing to the north, where it's been all the way through the winter. It does see some higher pressure over and to the south of the country, though. We're bringing in a westerly wind. So, I mean, it's a 3 monthly anomaly, and with such low pressure within the northern latitudes, there's obviously the potential early on, you would have thought, for quite a bit of unsettled and wet weather. But for the anomaly overall, I think later in the spring, it is probably seeing more influence from the Azores high and building pressure from the south and from the southwest. Temperature anomalies with the CanSITS model at tropicaltidbits.com being forecast to be slightly above average and rather milder than average spring being predicted there. Precipitation anomalies close to average. So maybe a wet early part of the spring offset by something rather drier maybe. Something like that could be going on there. But overall, neither particularly wet or particularly dry. Temperature probability forecast from IRI, which of course is International Research Institute for Climate and Society. It's part of Earth Institute and Columbia University. The temperature probability for this spring is favouring slightly above average temperatures for the UK and Ireland. Most parts of Northern Europe looking like they're going to have a very mild, if not a warm spring. For us, just a little bit above average, like 40% probability of above normal temperatures. So yes, a slightly mild average spring is favoured from the IRI probability maps. Precipitation wise, we're looks like we're close to average really. So western parts of UK and into Ireland actually favouring slightly above average precipitation, whereas eastern parts of UK may be favouring slightly below average. It's not a particularly big deviation either way. So I would have thought probably favouring average precipitation. Really notice it is forecasting, or the probabilities are forecasting, increased chance of dry and average conditions within the northern latitudes. That can sometimes be a bit indicative of northern blocking, and if we did get northern blocking through the spring, that would probably send the jet stream south, so you would expect a more unsettled and cooler spring than that implies. Next up, we have got the analogues from Patal-Peng, of course. So this is the 200 millibar height anomaly forecast for the spring of 2020 from Patal-Peng, and Patal, of course, is looking at the sea surface temperature anomalies across the world in any given month. In this case, looking at sea surface temperature anomalies last month in January, and then creating an analogues-based forecast from those sea surface temperature anomalies. So Patal is forecasting generally quite a lot of high pressure across Western Europe, above average heights to our southwest, but also extending northwards through the UK, and hints of a bit of northern blocking as well up towards Greenland. So that's quite a strange looking anomaly really, but the upshot is a lot of high pressure covering western parts of Europe through this spring, which you'd expect to be a relatively dry signal if nothing else. Temperature anomalies for Patal-Peng's analogues coming out above average for this spring, so he's going for a milder than average spring for the UK and for most parts of northern Europe as well. And then precipitation anomalies for this spring coming out drier. Yes, drier than average, as you'd expect, with high pressure dominating the west of Europe. So a mild but dry spring, maybe a warm and dry spring, being forecast from Patal-Peng's analogues. Then we go to the CFS-V2, so it's a 700 millibar height anomaly from the CFS-V2 for spring 2020, and forecasting more in way of high pressure above average heights sitting close to the UK and much of northern Europe. Below average heights are out to the northwest. Your jet stream's doing something a little bit like that as well. So you would expect a reasonable amount of dry weather through this spring. Again, maybe transitional. That is quite deep low pressure that we have up towards Greenland and Iceland. So maybe in March you would still get a continuation of the very unsettled weather that we've had through the spring. But as a 3-monthly anomaly, it does look as though we start to get more influence from high pressure there. Temperature anomalies with the CFS-V2 are being forecast to be above average, so a mild and average spring coming up, and precipitation anomalies are being forecast to be slightly wetter than average in the far north of the country, rather drier than average, though, through most parts of Western and Northern Europe, as that high pressure becomes more influential. So you can see where the jet stream is. The jet stream is up here across the northern parts of Europe. We're under that ridge of high pressure, though, but centering like there overall. But again, remember, it's a 3-monthly anomaly. So it could be transitional in that March might be a lot more unsettled, and then we finally get high pressure and warmer and dry conditions in April and May. Now, as we've been going along, the websites that we've got loaded up for this update have been refreshing annoyingly. So I'm going to pause the video there. I'm going to go through and refresh all of those websites off camera. And then we won't have all of those annoying white refresh moments as we go through the rest of the video. So I'm going to pause the video there, and I'll see you in around 2 seconds' time. Okay, we're back. All tabs and websites refreshed, and so we won't have any more refreshing going on as we go through the rest of this second and final season roundup for the spring of 2020. I've never understood the whole tab refresh thing. We can have like 80 tabs up for the winter updates, and we don't have any refreshing with that. Most of those tabs, of course, are analogs that have been uploaded from a computer, I suppose. But we get something like 13 websites together with 13 long-range models, and all sort of mayhem breaks loose with the tab. So anyway, if anybody knows why that happens, I assume it's just the websites that you're sort of linked to. Some of those websites maybe use up quite a lot of space within Google Chrome, perhaps something like that, particularly if they've got ads. I don't know. Anyway, we'll go on with the second and final seasonal round for spring 2020, and we're going to start off this second part of the video with the mean sea level pressure anomaly from the ECM. And looks like going for quite a nice spring, actually. Got a lot of low pressure up to the north, as we've seen through a lot of these models so far, but it's actually going for an area of above average pressure, high pressure to be centered across much of Western Europe. The jet stream, therefore, is doing something a bit like that. Again, it might be transitional. That's a lot of low pressure within the northern latitudes. We know what this winter has done. So for March, it could be that we see a continuation of this very unsettled weather. And then gradually, as the spring progresses, we go through to something rather drier. Something like that could be going on. Temperature anomalies for the ECMWF season model for spring 2020 are above average, not just for the UK, but for much of Northern Europe as well. Precipitation anomalies for this spring are looking like this. Overall, close to average. Again, maybe hinting at a wetter start or something. I mean, a bit dry later, something like that could be going on. This is mean cell pressure anomaly from Meteo France at Copernicus. This one goes for high pressure, be centered close to the country again. Low pressure is within the northern latitudes. Jet stream is pushed northwards as well. You'd expect quite a lot of dry weather under that area of high pressure through this spring. Temperature anomalies from Meteo France forecast to be above average, a half a degree to 1 degree above average on the temperature scale, and again, average precipitation, no signal particularly either way. This is a DWD model from Germany, and this one is going for a weak area of higher pressure to be over the top of the country. Again, a lot of low pressure in the northern latitudes, and it may not be all that quick to get into high pressure, therefore, but as an anomaly for the 3 months, yes, we do favour a little bit of a high pressure anyway through this spring. Again, DWD is forecasting above average temperatures during the spring of 2020. And also hinting at being maybe average to a little bit drier than average as well with the DWD. Finally, for this suite of models from Copernicus, we've got the CMCC, which is the Mediterranean model. This one looks a little bit more unsettled, I have to say. There's not as much high pressure across Western Europe. We've still got the low pressure, quite deep low pressure within the northern latitudes. You will think we still bring the jet stream into the country. So the CMCC looks like it could be more unsettled. Temperature anomalies with the CMCC being forecast to be a little bit above average, so a rather milder than average spring forecast. But it does also hint at maybe a little bit wetter than average during this spring, maybe slightly above average for precipitation. Not a big deviation, but I think out of those suite of models, the ECM, Meteo France, DWD, and CMCC, I think the CMCC is probably, probably the most unsettled for this spring. JAMSTEC next, and this is showing something that we haven't seen with any other model so far in this update. JAMSTEC is forecasting a colder than average spring with its temperature anomaly. Yes, it's going for below average temperatures for spring 2020. And precipitation-wise, also looking quite wet, so not a particularly inspiring spring, you have to say, if this is right. We've got a lot of high pressure up here, which is sort of northern blocking, and then above average precipitation, not only across the UK, but much of Western Europe as well. So go for quite a cold and wet spring, interestingly, with the JAMSTEC. Something very, very different in terms of the overall pattern compared to anything that we've seen so far. Beijing Climate Centre, penultimately, so we come to the end of the video now. Beijing Climate Centre, 500 millibar height anomaly, going for above average heights over much of Western Europe, including the UK, below average heights up here. Jet streams push northwards. It looks like a nice pattern for the spring. Spring 2020 being forecast to be dominated by high pressure with the Beijing Climate Centre, a real change compared to what we've had previous winter. Temperature anomalies are slightly above average. Not a particularly warm spring being forecast there, just a little bit above average in those yellow shadings, which is kind of like half a degree or so above average. So a mild and average spring, yes, but not excessively so. And of course, with high pressure dominating the scene, we have a drier than average season forecast as well. So definite hints of high pressure from the Beijing Climate Centre, bringing a drier than average and slightly warmer than average spring. And then finally, we go to our very own UK Met Office GLOSY 5 long-range model. So this is a mean sea pressure anomaly for spring 2020 from GLOSY 5. And again, it's going for higher pressure to be centred close to the UK. Again, lots of low pressure within the northern latitudes. That's then ongoing sort of situation from the winter carrying over into the spring, of course. Jet stream is up there somewhere, but for us, the Azores High looks like it's ridging in to the west of Europe, and so that does hopefully bring us, at the very least, some drier weather. Temperature anomalies from the UK Met season model forecast to be above average, so go for a milder than average spring. And precipitation-wise, quite interesting. It's certainly wet and average just to our north. So the UK itself may be hinting at going a little bit drier than average. Remember, that again could be transitional. So although the 3 months overall for the spring of 2020 dominated by high pressure with the UK Met season model, it could be, but it takes a while to get to that high pressure. So you might hint that March, for example, is pretty unsettling. It's not until April and May that the ridge finally takes over. But the overall trend of these lines bars, I think, is towards high pressure for this spring. That's definitely the trend that we've got here, bringing drier and also a relatively mild and rather benign spring, and hopefully allowing a substantial recovery from the horrendously wet winter floods that we have had. If this is right, then hopefully, yes, we will see higher pressure as the spring goes along, and that brings something a good deal drier as the spring develops. Remember, there are a few models in there that are deviating from that, though. Most notably, the Brazilian model does hint at being quite an unsettled spring, I think, and particularly JAMSTEC. JAMSTEC is going for something very different, hints of northern blocking and a cold and wet spring being forecast from JAMSTEC. Often JAMSTEC is different, and often JAMSTEC is a bit colder than most of the other models and doesn't verify. If it's got this right, and we do finish up with a cold, wet spring with northern blocking, then it will be hats off to JAMSTEC indeed. But it's on its own with that, and most of these long-range models are forecasting a drier spring, more in way of higher pressure, and a relatively warm spring as well. Right, so that's the last thing we can do for you in terms of the spring updates. Tomorrow, all that's left is to release the GarethRobins.com spring 2020 forecast. So you will find out then, you will find out tomorrow what we are forecasting for the spring of 2020 at GavsWeatherVids.com. We're going to have the weekend forecast coming up for you later on, and we'll also have a week 10-day video update as well. Lots of updates tomorrow. So we've got spring forecast, of course, first video up, most importantly, and then we will have Gavs Weathervids Sunday Roundup. We'll probably have a little sneak peek for the summer, because that's where the long range bandwagon will roll on to. Have Terry Scoley's March forecast for you tomorrow as well, so there can be loads going on at the website. Do keep checking back to all of it. This video will be placed on the spring updates page with a written summary going over everything that we discussed in the video, and I'll get that up for you this evening. But that's all for now, and thanks for watching.